On May 1st, 2025, after spending more than 20 years on death row in Florida, Jeffrey Glenn Hutchinson was put to death by lethal injection. Jeffrey's crimes were as brutal as they were senseless, leaving a trail of devastation. In this video, we'll uncover what happened that day, his last words and his last meal. But to understand what got him on death row in the first place, we need to go back to the night of September 11th, 1998, to a quiet neighborhood in Crestview, Florida, where 4 lives were wiped out in a single night. Inside a small house, a woman and her 3 children were shot execution style in the head. No mercy, no chance to run. And the killer? It wasn't a stranger. It was someone they knew, someone they trusted, someone who lived under the same roof. The man was Jeffrey Hutchinson, a former Army Ranger who had once fought in the Gulf War. He shared a home at the time with Renee Flaherty, his girlfriend, and her 3 kids, Logan, Amanda, and Jeffrey. From the outside, their home seemed peaceful. Jeffrey and Renee had what looked like a good relationship. He cared about the kids, treated them like they were his own. He played with them, helped raise them, and was a part of their everyday lives. He loved the kids. He loved Renee. At least that's what everyone thought. He had no flags and no major fights that friends or family talked about. If something darker was brewing inside Jeffrey, he never let it show, not until that night. Around 7 p.m., Renee made a casual call to a friend. The call started out normal, and Renee sounded happy. Jeffrey was in the house too. At one point, her friend even heard Jeffrey in the background sounding cheerful. "Cindy, hello, how are you?" Everything appeared to be all right. But by 7:30, Renee called his father ahead of time. But by 7:30 p.m., everything changed. Renee called another friend, and this time her voice cracked the second she spoke. "We had a fight."
I like the little ones. I don't like those little ones, man. Look at these.
When her friend asked what happened, Renee admitted it was bad. Really bad. They had a big fight, and Jeffrey had packed up some clothes, grabbed his guns, and stormed out. "He's gone," Renee said. She believed it was finished. The worst, she believed, was already over. However, it hadn't. After storming out, Jeffrey didn't go far. He ended up at a local bar, a place where he and Renee were regular faces. But this time, he drank hard and vented to anyone who would listen. He told the bartender, someone who knew them both, that Renee was pissed off, and they just needed time to cool down. But he wasn't cooling down, not even close. Instead, he got back into his truck, a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun sitting beside him, and drove home. Less than an hour after storming out, he walked back in and opened fire. Inside that small, quiet house, Jeffrey shot Renee first, once in the head. Then he moved from room to room, hunting down the children he had once tucked into bed. He found Jeffrey first, the oldest at just 9 years old. Jeffrey shot him in the chest, but the boy didn't die right away. So Jeffrey stood over him and fired again, this time a bullet to the head. Amanda, 7 years old, and Logan, only 4, never stood a chance. Their lives ended instantly as a single shotgun round murdered them all. After it was over, Jeffrey picked up the phone, called 911, and calmly said, "I just shot my family." When officers arrived at the house, they found him sitting in the garage with a phone in his hand, still connected to the 911 operator. He didn't resist. He didn't run. He just stood up and left. He didn't say a word. He just stood there and let them take him in. Inside, the horror waited. Renee and her youngest 2, Amanda and Logan, were found together in the bedroom. Jeffrey's body lay in the living room, alone. At first, Jeffrey told a strange story. He claimed 2 men wearing ski masks had broken in, killed everyone, and ran off. But the evidence told a different story. Police found gunshot residue on Jeffrey's hands. They also found shotgun shots. Additionally, they discovered tissue from Jeffrey's body on his leg, and bullet wounds on the kitchen counter. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of anyone else stepping inside that night. Everything pointed to one person, Jeffrey Hutchinson. But who exactly was Jeffrey? He was born on November 6, 1962, and grew up in Florida, in a big, noisy house full of brothers and sisters. Life at home wasn't perfect, but it wasn't the kind of place anyone would have called dangerous. He was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, but people who knew Jeffrey back then said he had a pretty normal childhood. After high school, he bounced between jobs. He worked as a mechanic for a while, then picked up shifts as a security guard. His supervisors were unconcerned. He kept his head down, followed instructions, and arrived on time. He was the kind of employee you didn't have to worry about. Then he joined the military. Jeffrey trained as a paratrooper, earned a spot as an Army Ranger. He fought overseas during the Gulf War, including in Operation Desert Storm in 1991. But when he came back home, something had changed. His family saw it before he even said a word. He was angrier now, quieter. He couldn't sleep, and when sleep wouldn't come, the drinking did. The Army honorably discharged him, but civilian life didn't heal anything. His first marriage ended in divorce, and his second marriage didn't last long either. Whatever demons he brought back from the war, he never shook them off. And over time, it only got worse. Then he met Renee Flaherty, a 32-year-old single mother, doing her best to build a good life for her kids. She worked hard and kept her life steady. And after some time together, they packed up and moved from Washington to Florida. For about a year and a half, everything seemed to be going great. Under the surface, something inside Jeffrey was cracking. And on that night in September, it snapped. After the murders, Jeffrey's story kept changing. At first, he said he'd been drunk and blacked out. Later, he claimed it was a crime of passion, not something he had planned. The trial began in early 2001, and his defense team tried everything they had. Gulf War trauma, his alcohol abuse, mental illness. They brought in experts who said Jeffrey was bipolar, his thinking was off, and he wasn't completely in control when he squeezed the trigger, according to the specialists they called in. However, the jury rejected it. The judge subsequently concluded that the defendant's diagnosis of Gulf War sickness had nothing to do with the killings of these victims. What Jeffrey did to Renee and her kids was inexplicable, regardless of what he had been through. They also convicted him guilty of all 4 killings after he testified for 9 days. At sentencing, the jury was able to find out that Jeffrey was a victim of a crime of passion, not something he had planned. And after 9 days of testimony, they found him guilty of all 4 murders. Then he argued that he hadn't gotten a fair trial, that the death penalty was wrong in his case, that his mental health hadn't been fully considered. But every court that reviewed his case said the same thing. He deserved to die for what he did. He spent 26 years on death row. Jeffrey's execution was scheduled for May 1st, 2025. For his final meal, he requested salmon, mahi-mahi, asparagus, baked potato, and iced tea. He had 3 visitors that day, includes a spiritual counselor and his sister. He was escorted into the execution chamber that night and strapped to the gurney. When asked if he had any final words, he said nothing. But as the process began, witnesses saw his lips move, soft, almost inaudible, as if he were talking to himself or whispering a prayer. The state chose lethal injection as the method to execute him. His legs shook sporadically, and he seemed to have body spasms for several minutes before falling still. The process took a little more than 15 minutes. He was declared dead at 8:15 p.m. Jeffrey Hutchinson was 62 years old. Share your thoughts on these cases. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue following other stories of justice, crime, and society's justice. We'll see you next time.